Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I am Gemma Files. And this, of course, is No
No
Darkness
darkness but
But
ours.
Ours.
In our last podcast, we attempted a definition of folk horror and looked at the so-called unholy trinity of foundational folk horror films, The Wicker Man, The Blood on Satan's Claw, and Witchfinder General, before turning our attention to folk horror beyond the UK and US and across the world, and to the blurred line in horror fiction between the supernatural, the cultural, and the psychological. We also touched, as well, on the sheer weirdness of Celtic mythology, as used by Alan Garner in his novel, The Owl Service.
To go back to Alan Garner just for a second, for the Owl Service, we begin with three teenagers. Two of them are the children. One the stepdaughter, and one the son of this blended couple of British people, and who have
English people.
Yeah, sorry, English people.
Very important distinction there.
Very important distinction. Okay, so English people who have sort of become the occupants of this landhold in Wales. And so you can say that they are the landholders, but they are not the people who should be holding that land. And then you've got a third guy who is Welsh. And his mother has been a servant in the house his entire life. He's kind of expected to take over that place as well, to serve these people, but he has his own ambitions, and he and the girl are very attracted towards each other, but her stepbrother, really does not want anything to happen between them, because there's class divisions, and there's the fact that the dude is Welsh and they're English, and so we come in with this triangle already there, which is and so and these these laws and these standards that are pushing them together and pulling them apart at the same time, and then and then we move into this thing where they go up into the attic and they find these old plates, and the plates have a pattern on them. And when you look at the pattern from one side, it looks like flowers. And when you look at it from the other side, it looks like owls.
It's the Owl Service.
It's the Owl Service. And and the girl starts just sketching this pattern over and over and over again. And that's enough in itself to open up this whole much larger sense of a myth that goes back and back and back and back through the years towards a story about three people, a story about Blodeuwedd, a woman made out of flowers, who is made for a man to be his wife, but she falls in love with someone else. And eventually she turns into owls.
Yeah, they conspire to kill the husband, and then as a punishment, the other guy is killed or something, and then she's turned into an owl. So it's kind of that kind of love triangle and its tragic resolution. And with all these underpinnings of you create thinking this woman can just she'll just love who you tell her to and be the wife of who you tell her to, and actually no, she's got her own ideas about that.
Exactly the same way that the Welsh guy has his own ideas about his.
So he's even though he's not, so he's even though it's one of them, he's one of the males rather than he's got the woman's kind of role in that sense. Yeah, and it's always, it's the way it kind of goes back and forth. And I love the way as well that, I mean, without wishing to get too much into spoilery territory, the way that the cycle is actually broken by the last person you'd think would actually do it.
That's right. Yeah.
The stepbrother who seems like such a complete arsehole for most of the.
That's true. And he does it in such a simple way, like a super simple way, sort of embracing the protoplasmic or protozoan elements of Welsh mythology and going, if you turned one way, you can go back.
Yes.
You can be what you want to be.
Yeah.
Nothing has to make you anything.
One of the things I love about Garner as well is, the story ends and that's it. There's nothing, there's no, you never find out what the hell happens after.
No.
It's brought to a conclusion. That aspect of it's resolved. What happens next? I have no fucking. Who gives a shit? No, well, Nick, you may give a shit. I mean, you can just imagine lots of people writing fan fiction.
Yeah, it's true. It's like, I hope that that the Welsh guy gets to go off to university and doesn't have to be stuck in this place the entire time. I hope that the girl doesn't necessarily have to end up with either of them if she doesn't want to. Yeah, there's all sorts of and of course Redshift, which we've talked about before.
Oh god,
I think
it's just amazing.
Yeah, and here again with Redshift, you have 3 things going on in different time periods, and they all sort of echo each other, and
linked with mainly with one particular artifact, which pops up in each.
Linked by one particular artifact, linked also by the redshift.
And by a particular location.
Yeah.
As well, by
and the location, which, again, brings us back to landscape and how, landscape is, I would say that landscape is always like a good third of a story.
Oh God, where it
with folk horror,
Oh God, where it. I mean, with a lot of the time where it happens, it's you have to have that. The place often becomes a character, and so especially in folk horror, it can't not, because so much of what's going on is so rooted to that particular place.
On Netflix, there is a new series called Alma, or The Girl in the Mirror. And it takes place, I believe, fairly close to the Pyrenees, or
You've seen I think I've seen the trailer for that.
Yeah, that's right. And there's all sorts of amazing stuff going on. But spirits hopping from body to body at the moment where you pop out of your body as you're almost ready to die. And an ancient god made out of 6 prehistoric animals, and a book that tells you what's going to happen in the future that was written in the Middle Ages. So it has illustrations that look like our main characters, except they're all wearing medieval clothes because the person who wrote it, couldn't see them any other way. And, it's fascinating stuff. And, I believe a fair amount of, the infusion of Catharism or Gnosticism that you get in that part of the world, because that's essentially where a lot of Cathar action happened, the places where France and Spain and maybe a little bit of Germany kind of crossed over, and you get all of that Pyrenean Gnostic action. So I really loved it. It was amazing. Oh yeah, and Brocken Spectres, by the way.
What's it?
There's this thing that happens supposedly at the Brocken, which is a mountain where
the big sort of the giant spectres, which are basically the reflections of climbers on the
clouds. Exactly. So at a certain point, there's this it opens with this huge bus crash that happens while a bunch of people who are just about to from this tiny village who are just about to graduate from high school, have gone out to stay at a place up the mountain, and they're driving home, and there's this terrible bus crash. And one of them looks up as the bus is crashing and sees 6 Brocken specters coming over the mountain, moving downward towards them.
Is this from that Girl in the Mirror, or is this a different film?
Girl in the Mirror, yeah. So
yeah,
all of that is in there. And that reminded me that I had never watched the end of Feria, La Luz Más Obscura, Feria, the Darkest Light, which is, again, set in the Pyrenees. It's Spanish, and again, about Gnostic weirdness. Involving, in this case, going down into a mine, which is full of gas, which will kill you, and opening a door into like a Gnostic parallel dimension that could be heaven, could be hell, you know, and archons that come out of this door, and one of which is a weird little cat-like creature that crawls inside of people.
Jesus.
And lives inside them. Yeah, it's just insane. It's completely nuts. You know, but again, very clear Cathar mythology that's happening there, because they keep talking about getting rid of your flesh, and how the world is a trap, and love is a trap, and sex is a trap, and only las perfecta, you know, the perfects, can open the door. You know, which is complete Catharism. And from that, finishing off that, which again is wonderful, although it ends on a serious cliffhanger, I went back to Black Spot, aka Zone Blanche, which is on the French side of the Pyrenees, and also involves Celtic mythology, like really, really old, like a god / guardian of the forest. And, you know, this is a place where things don't work very well when they're technological, you know, and often you feel that stuff that happened in the past is informing the present.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it's just a, you know, procedural involving, you know, the cops in this tiny, tiny little village, but it's also so much more.
I mean, that reminds me of a trilogy of films which I know we both enjoyed, which was, I think, based on the Dolores Redondo novels, the Invisible Guardian, The Legacy of the Bones, and Offering to the Storm.
Yes, yes, specifically in Basque country, where they still call witches Gazari.
That's it. That's it. The Baztan trilogy. I think it's.
That's right.
I think it's referred to.
Yeah, and all of that is on Netflix. All of that was produced through Netflix, so it'll be on there forever. And all of that is folk horror.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just. I mean, I really want to rewatch that, actually, because I remember absolutely loving it, and it works brilliantly as a crime, as a series of as a crime thriller.
Yes.
It also has those kind of but I mean, it's beautifully done, and I think I remember we said as well that the character gets to kind of mess up in the main female detective in ways that, you know, would often be considered, what, a woman doing that? But of course, if a
exactly.
Man
or the fact that she's you know, the person in her family that she's so afraid of is her mother.
Yes,
you
that's
know,
right.
Who is indeed genuinely horrifying.
Yes. Oh, God. It's all starting to come back now. It's been as I said, been a good few years since I remember us talking about it at the time around the time these films came out, and you know, because we both really, really rated them. But yeah, I think it's. And of course, want to get into another film here. Maybe I need to talk about. I know we were talking about doing making a sort of separate segment about this, but George Popov's horror film, The Droving, which I've rewatched several times now. I keep coming back to this film,
Yeah, George Popov is a really interesting dude because I believe he comes from
Bulgaria, I think.
Bulgaria, yeah. And he now lives in the UK. And he's obsessed with various haunted forests and areas in the UK. And, so he absolutely builds his narratives around bits of landscape. And
his first film X was very interesting, but I mean that also stars Daniel Oldroyd, who is the protagonist of The Droving, and
that's right,
whose performance in that is, I think, absolutely magnificent and absolutely carries the whole film in many ways.
Yes.
I mean, it's incredible use of landscaping and marvelous sense of place. And I remember, I mean, for anyone who's it's one of these films which you really want to tell people about and really want to talk about, but at the same time you're kind of loath to do it too much, because there's always a danger that you will you'll give stuff away.
Yeah, so I don't want to give too much away about it, but I will say that it, the Droving itself is an event that takes place in a tiny little village. It seems very much to be like the kind of mummers festival that you get all over the UK in various areas.
It's it is actually a genuine an actual genuine ritual that or not ritual, festival. Might be
it's a festival that obviously calls back to earlier rituals. Why would you drive creatures towards a particular area? I think probably to have like a big sacrifice and a rave up.
I think it is more. I mean, because this is because basically it was basically cattle drives. People drove people would have their cattle usually into market towns to sell, and I think that's the. I was just trying to actually find out a bit more background about it, because, as I said, I believe it's a genuine festival. Because the actual film sort of just incorporates real footage of it.
But it's the kind of thing where people dress up in masks, they dress up in costumes, there's a kind of anonymity to it. Everybody's getting pissed. There are fights. And all of it, and lots of music, and all of it is like part of the thing itself. It's part of the ritual. It's like, let's all go to this place and get kind of out of our minds. There's a kind of Dionysian kind of ideal behind it. Let's get drunk and high and connect with the land, connect with the gods, connect with each other in every way that can be done. But he also finds this very little tiny piece of, I think, super specific folklore, which may or may not exist, and builds the rest of the film around that.
I mean, what really gets me, because I mean, I actually I kind of hesitated to watch it at first, because I mean the basic premise, I think we can say this without worrying about spoiling anything, is the main character is a former soldier who's now come home. His sister has disappeared a year ago, around the time of last year's Droving festival, and he wants to find out what has happened to her, and he's quite prepared to do whatever it takes to find out. And you probably, and I shied away from this, because I thought, oh god, I can predict how this is gonna, this is what this is gonna be, how it's gonna end, and do I even want to see it? And then I watched it, and it did not go where I thought it was going to go at all.
Not at all.
And
which actually is true of Hex as well. Hex goes in at least a slightly different place than I thought it was going to end up. And the difference between the two is that Hex is set during the Civil War, the English Civil War, and and the droving is set contemporarily.
Yes, and there's a scene that is at the heart of the droving,
Mm-hmm.
which is where you realize what's actually going on, and you also discover, again, it is a scene in which Daniel Oldroyd's performance as Martin the soldier really shows what it really comes to the fore.
Yeah.
And
yeah, he opens himself up in a really impressive way.
Yeah.
So Popov is doing something that, I mean, these are tiny little films, right? They're like micro budget. They are, they're shot on, they're definitely shot on video. But he's got all the right instincts. And, he's also done some really interesting documentaries, which are, again, about landscape or seascape and the folklore associated with those things. It's so one of the things that I did at Necronomicon was I picked up a copy of All the Haunts Be Ours, a compendium of folk horror films released by Severin Films, and it basically is a collection that was put together to support Kirla Janice's folk horror documentary, which, by the way, is on Shudder. If you have that, and is absolutely worth your time. It's 3 hours long, so just know that going in. But it's hypnotically beautiful, and will tell you things that possibly you didn't know. So 19 of the best known, least known, rarely seen, and thought lost classics of folk horror from around the world, all restored from the best available vault elements. The things that are in there include Eyes of Fire, Leptirica, Witchhammer, V, Lake of the Dead, Tilbury, The Dreaming, Kadicha, Celia, Allison's Birthday, Wilchicha, Locus, a manuscript of Professor Wittenbach, Clearcut, Il Demonio, Dark Waters, A Field in England, Anchoress, Pendesven, and Robin Redbreast. So we're moving from America through Europe, mainly Eastern Europe, to, we've got 4 films straight from Australia, which fascinates me. And all of which are about, again, lost history, mainly lost colonialist history.
You have that, don't you, with countries like Australia, which are built where, because obviously, on the one hand, there's the colonial aspect and there's the suppression of an indigenous culture. On the other hand, there are people who are uprooted from their
own culture.
Their own culture. They're bringing that over. It's what they bring over with them. I mean, this is one of the interesting things. You were talking about the one where the yokai are fighting off an incursion from a Babylonian demon, something from a completely different myth cycle. I remember thinking of something I saw in the news a while back was that they're in Northern Ireland, where there's a lot of need. There's quite a need to teach for people to learn dry stone walling, because there's a lot of call for that. And one group of people who've actually been playing a very big part of that are Syrian refugees.
That makes sense.
To escape the war from Syria, and yet, of course, they're actually finding, the being outdoors and doing these, and doing this kind of work with their hands actually quite helpful and therapeutic in its own right. And at the same time, you've got these 2 very, very different cultures being brought into contact. In the horror writing, you think, what could be done about this? But of course, it's a very difficult. So that's a very difficult thing to write about, because you want to avoid kind of xenophobia. There is always that thing when you're looking at the mythologies of different cultures of not just this other culture's mythology. They're evil. I tell you, evil. All these,
No, I mean you definitely don't want to do that. I mean, okay, so obviously you don't want to appropriate or expropriate somebody else's culture. On the other hand, I think it's entirely possible to look at yourself and turn inward and say, well, what kind of culture do I come from? What are the parts of myself that I have not explored? Which again, brings me back to the way that I write horror generally. It's like I look at these Australian horror films and I feel proud in the same way that I feel proud that they decided to put Clear Cut, which is a Canadian film, on this in this collection. Graham Greene playing a guy who might be a trickster figure, might be just a very angry Indigenous man, might be both at the same time. And it is very much about, you come in and you ruin the ecology, which to some degree was my birthright. And what can be done about that? What is to be done about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's again sort of ecological themes kind of bleed very easily into this kind of narrative as well, because again, certainly a lot of pre-Christian religions are very much about, as you say, there is something behind everything. There is a spiritual dimension to the river, the tree, actually another, and this is possibly, I don't think the book was necessarily, although I know the film isn't highly rated. I wouldn't mind actually seeing it again. I saw it when I was about I think my age might still have been in single digits, but Martin Cruz Smith's novel Nightwing, in which an old Native American medicine man essentially utters a curse against the world because the Hopi Indians are basically being exploited, basically driven to extinction, their culture destroyed, and now I think there's supposed to be some sort of plan to exploit oil on their lands, which may bring material prosperity, but would destroy things that are sacred, and essentially unleashes a swarm of like vampire bats to kind of, and
absolutely. Think about the fact that there is in fact a back god, a Mexican back god, from the Mexica pantheon called Camazots. People. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. As I say, I remember vaguely seeing the film, and I kind of enjoyed it, but I didn't have much in the way of critical faculties at the age of 9 or 10 or however old I was.
Sure.
And I was watching it on a very small black and white portable TV with the volume turned down low, late at night, hoping my parents wouldn't hear. So I'm probably not the best. I probably wasn't the best judge of quality. I don't think the film is particularly well regarded, but I do remember the book being very impressive, because Smith is can be a very fine prose writer, and he can do this kind of thing where, his two gypsy novels, Gypsy and Amber and Canto for a Gypsy, both kind of, again, they both play with kind of just moving along that kind of hinterland between the detective story and something which has hints of the supernatural, ambiguous hints of the supernatural in it. Obviously, he's best known for his crime fiction, particularly the Arkady Renko books. But yeah, Nightwing is a particularly
it's like David Morrell's novel, which is ostensibly about rabies, but might be about something considerably earlier. God, what was that? Yeah, The Totem. Yes, absolutely. And the idea of a totem, the idea of something representing something else, is integral to horror in general, but it's absolutely integral to folk horror.
Yes.
The idea that, this means this and therefore this. There's a real kind of, it's you're thinking mythologically, but you're also thinking poetically, and particularly when you're thinking about a culture which has been, destroyed. When you're thinking about a culture that's been destroyed and plowed under,
This is where you have to reckon with colonialism and
exactly, and the only echoes that you're likely to find of that culture are going to be ones that come through another culture, through the culture that supplanted it. I'm thinking about what we know about the Etruscans, for example. What we know about the Etruscans comes directly through the early history of the Romans. And because the Romans essentially supplanted the Etruscans.
Yeah.
And when we think about the story of Tarquin, Tarquin the Great, who was the last king of Rome, he came from an Etruscan family of royalty. And he was replaced. He was accused of raping someone's wife, and yeah, exactly. Lucretia.
Shakespeare wrote a poem about it, as I seem to recall.
Yes, that's true.
And there's a play by, I think, Thomas Haywood, one of the Elizabethan playwrights, dramatizing
that's right.
it.
And at that point, the Etruscans go into deep history to some degree. Nobody even really knows how to completely translate their language anymore, and yet if you look at the stuff that people have found in Etruscan tombs, particularly their sculpture and their murals, it all looks super fresh and very human and very immediate. These amazing tomb sculptures where instead of two people lying back on a tomb, which is for a man and his wife, the top of the tomb looks like a couch, and they're sitting on the couch embracing each other, wow. like they're about to have an amazing sex or an amazing meal. And
or if they're cannibals, both.
Yeah, possibly both. Evangeline Walton wrote an entire novel which is about the lure of a dead civilization, in that case the Etruscan civilization, called I believe She Walks in Shadows. And yeah, there's always something before everything. I mean, think about, wouldn't it be nice to know what Neanderthals were actually like? Wouldn't it be nice to know what Denisovans were like when we only have, the root genetic matter of a couple of teeth, a couple of scattered teeth?
Yes, very much so. Actually, there's a novella by John Brunner called They Take, which is, a fantastic, a very dark piece of folk horror with no supernatural elements, but which essentially proposes the survival of kind of a relict population of Etruscans. They don't marry, they take, is a line from the story. I think I'll let you seek it out and discover its.
I will definitely seek that out because that sounds amazing. I love that idea. It's like when you don't know a lot about something, it becomes fascinating, or at least it becomes fascinating to me. And maybe it's the M.R. James in me. Maybe it's the old antiquarian impulse, But I like to see how things resonate, and I like to trace the ways that the same patterns seem to pop up again and again and again. The way that there is some kind of relationship between Dionysus and the Maenads, and Osiris getting ripped apart, and his wife putting him back together, but not being able to find his dick.
Yeah, it's all her fault she couldn't find it. It's not like, come on, Osiris, maybe see a doctor about the old...
Well, what's funny, of course, is that Osiris, when he was alive, was the god of growing things, and then he becomes the god of the dead.
Grow, but not that.
Yeah, exactly. Then he becomes the god of the dead. But he still looks green because he is still the god of growing things, and things grow from under the ground.
True. Sorry, I'm just remembering there was we've been rewatching one of a comedy show we absolutely love, New Girl, with Zooey Deschanel.
Yes.
And there is actually an episode where she dates a guy with a micro penis.
No.
Although she discovers that I mean, it's because of an argument she has with her friends about how her male friends, how they're all shallow and they only judge women on things like their breasts. And it's like, okay, so she's talking to this guy, he's fairly good looking, and then he reveals he's got a micro penis. So one of her male friends is like, okay, you've got to date him for like a month.
Yeah.
They have a bet, if you can't date him for a month, she has to give him $500 and he'll give her $500 if she. I mean, it's like she goes, no, it's not the micro penis, it's his purse, it's everything else about him. He's a pavement artist, he's a. The thing is, the guy, it's not that he has a micro penis, it's that he's just a genuinely awful person. But of course, he will always try and bring things around and blame it on the fact that he has a micro penis.
Yeah, exactly. You just don't want to date me because I have a micro penis. No, it's everything else. Yeah,
exactly. The weirdest thing is the guy who plays him. It's the same guy who plays. It's Alan Richardson, the guy who plays Jack Reacher in the new Amazon series. And you hardly recognize him. He is actually a very good actor because he's playing this character. His character is so far away from Jack Reacher, that I'm pretty sure Jack Reacher. I wouldn't like to accuse Jack Reacher of having a micro penis. Obviously,
no. I think that would be a bad idea.
That way, hospitalized. I'm fairly sure from the books, anyway, that the various women he's encountered over time have not had any complaints in that department.
But yeah, it's like so there's this real sense of echoing. There's this real sense of reproducing of things. Just like much like I did we say this to do with something else? But, much like the signal in Ringu, of, like a single thought by a girl who's dying in a well, produces an avatar of her own, pain and rage, which, continues to crawl out and kill people, to kill anybody who, catches the signal. And similarly in folk horror, that's the thing that fascinates me. Not only that, we have like a clash of cultures or an intersection of cultures, something weird and liminal going on, because when things cross over, there's always a weird liminality, which happens. But also
and horror is always about crossing a boundary, and often without even realizing you've done it. And of course, if you're going into a place that has this different hidden knowledge, this different hidden culture with all its kind of unspoken taboos, which you may be completely ignorant enough, you could royally fuck yourself before you even know what you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
In so many ways.
You fucked up, right? Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's like you don't know you fucked up, but yeah, you're plowing a field and you find a part of a demon with a blinking eye that looks up out at you, and is that your fault?
At that point, you've done fucked up.
Yeah. But is that your fault? This is the thing.
Oh, no.
It's like,
but again, it's not necessarily about fault. I mean, again, that's a very Christian way of looking at it.
Deserves got nothing to do with it, son.
Exactly. Exactly, as they say, Jesus says in Unforgiven.
Yeah.
We have the Christian mindset is very much, the bad thing is some kind of punishment from God for being a dick in some way. Whereas, again, you look time and again at at pagan mythology, Greek mythology, and people got some bad shit happening to them because this god was pissed off, or because Hera was pissed off because Zeus had shagged someone else again. 90% of, I mean, how much of Greek mythology is about Zeus putting his dick somewhere when it wasn't supposed to? A great deal.
Yes.
Or just just sleep, falling asleep in the wrong place. Any number of things.
Or you pick flowers that you've never seen before and you turn into a werewolf.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, is that my fault? Is that my fault? It's like, no, it's not your fault.
It's not your fault, but of course you still. I mean, like in Cycle of the Werewolf. I mean, it's or in any of the werewolf stories, the werewolf. It's not their fault 90% of the time.
90% of the time, but sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is. But in those cases, it's not their fault. They don't necessarily want to go around killing people every full moon, although there can often be that thing where the two start bleeding together because the werewolf can often be acting out your darker desires. But again, ultimately, there is this thing of, well, whether it's your fault or not, something's got to be done to stop this.
Yes.
And nobody wants to actually necessarily die. I mean, American Werewolf in London handles that wonderfully.
Yes.
You've got to kill yourself. It's like, I'm not supposed to use a silver bullet. David, be serious. He's there in a movie theater surrounded by dead bodies. Isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. And trailing this long trail of ghosts of people that he killed, and the ghosts rotting.
He's eaten.
Some
of whom were quite good-humored about it, and some of them are very pissed off.
Yes, and very pissy. Very British.
Yes, yeah, it's a fantastic film in so many levels, and features and also has a role for the wonderful John Woodvine, who's still alive. I think maybe possibly still working. He's in his 90s now. But as the Dr. Hirsch, I was thinking one of the few actors who could still carry off the whole Peter Cushing shtick of convincing some hard-nosed Bobby from Scotland Yard that a vampire is running around London.
Or a person who's behaving like a vampire.
That was the second of a 3-part podcast about folk horror. Join us next time for the final instalment, where, among other things, we discuss the case for Straw Dogs being a folk horror film, and of how the darkness under the surface can be as much of the human soul as it is of the land. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please feel free to make a donation through our Patreon or our Ko-Fi pages. And if our discussion about the droving sparked your interest, watch out or listen out for our upcoming special edition of the podcast, where we'll be talking to its director, George Popov, and its star, Daniel Oldroyd.
Until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
And I have been Gemma Files.
And this has been, of course, No
Darkness but ours.